Hey guys, so this is a video to kind of go over and review the plot, and specifically on the plot diagram for the circuit. Remember guys that like a plot diagram is essentially like a summary of a story. So just a little hint there. Okay, so remember that this part at the beginning, this is the down here, this is the exposition. This is the beginning of the story. It's where you learn a little bit about your characters, and in a short story, it's often not that long. Okay? It could be sentences. Also, the setting is here in the red box. In these two blue boxes, you're going to put the rising action. Depending on the length of the story, you may not have two boxes of information to write, but in most stories you will, so I put two boxes. While the rising action is happening, that's the events in the story, reaching to the exciting part, that's where the conflict is introduced. Remember, there is no story without conflict, so the conflict is part of the rising action. The climax is up here. This is the most exciting part of the story. It's when the character does something happens to them, or they experience some sort of mental and emotional change from which they cannot turn back. Okay? And they can't turn back because now they got to go down the hill, right? They are committed to the going down the hill in the rest of the story. And then the falling action is, again, what happens immediately after the climax. What's immediately after that? And then the resolution is what happens a little bit later. It's kind of like the wrapping it up. In a movie or a book, it might say like 1 year later, 1 week later, whatever. Not always like that. And then remember also that in a short story, or actually in any story that is a cliffhanger, especially if there's like a second story or movie, there may not be a resolution. It's a cliffhanger. It's super frustrating, but it keeps you interested. So that's plot in general. Let's talk about the plot in the circuit. Okay? So, in the exposition, first of all, the setting is we're in farms in California, right? Some of you might have put Fresno, that's fine. But basically, they're working the fields, right? And the background, the exposition, is that Panchito and his family work in the fields to pick produce. They move a lot, and Panchito doesn't get steady schooling. Boom, done. That's the history that we get in the first couple of chapters when his dad's sitting there talking about the car and stuff like that. Now, the next part of the story, Panchito and his family move, right, to a new place, and that's what they're doing when the story starts. And he's able to go to school, but he struggles because he's missed a lot of school, and he's learning English. Okay? Then a teacher starts to reach out to Panchito, but at first he resists because he guesses he'll have to move again. Now, a conflict, which is part of the rising action, right? There might be things in the rising action that are conflict, and anything in the conflict is also rising action. So they kind of coincide. Panchito wants to go to school, but cannot go regularly because his family moves so much. You could also add that he struggles when he is in school because he hasn't had enough schooling. So when he does get to go to school, he's behind. But he wants to sit and struggle all day, right? Okay. Now, this is like our trajectory. Panchito and his family move all the time. He goes to school for a little bit. Fine. Now he's got a teacher who's trying to make connections with him, but he's kind of holding back because he guesses he's going to have to move. Okay. That could go on all day. Like the story could just keep going on like that, except it'd be super boring. So something has to change. And what changes is that Panchito finally makes a connection with that teacher, right? Teacher wants to teach him trumpet, I think, so the teacher gets through to him through music, and he's like, he opens up, like emotionally, to the teacher. That's the change. He's at a turning point because at this point now he's either going to go down the road of, becoming an amazing, band musician because his one amazing teacher taught him how, or something's going to stop that because that's how stories work. It's going to be one or the other, but something's got to happen at this point. And that is the resolution or the falling action, which is that Panchito goes home to find he has to move again. And in this story, I would argue there's not a resolution. Or you could put literally when they're packing their boxes. But I would argue, you could easily argue there's not a resolution. This story is part of a larger novel. And so you could easily argue that there's not a resolution in this part. Okie dokie. I hope that helps. Bye, y'all.